What is up, guys? Today we're going to talk about pussies in prison. Now, when I talk about pussies in prison, I'm not talking about weak people, people that go to prison that maybe get bullied or maybe they're crying in prison. I'm not talking about people like that. I'm talking about pussies who give it the large, give it the Billy big bollocks, and then when they get in there, they're crying in the cell. And that's to me, that's what a pussy is. It's not somebody who struggles in prison, because prison is a tough place. It can change you as a person. You might not even realize it. I know it changed me. It made me I remember when I first got out, and I was still in prison mode, and somebody pushed in front of me in a queue, and I kicked off. I was like, "Hey, get to back, you dickhead!" Like I was still in prison. That's when I realised, fucking hell, I've got to chill out, because that's what it does. Prison can change you as a person. A good example is there's a documentary, or there's a few documentaries about it, and it's called the Stanford Prison. What is it now? The Stanford Prison Experiment. If you Google it, you'll see it. They've made films about it, and what they did is they did an experiment. They took 10, or let's say roughly, they took 20 people from the street, just 20 normal people, and they put them in an old empty prison, and they gave 10 people like a badge and keys and a baton, and the other 10, they took everything off them and give them nothing. So 10 were the screws and 10 were the prisoners. And halfway through, they had to halt the entire experiment because it went tragically wrong. The people that were supposed to be the guards were abusing the inmates. And that's how prison can change you. I think they might have been sexually abusing them. I'm not 100% on that, but they had to stop the experiment because they were overly abusing the inmates. Even though they weren't real screws, they weren't real inmates, they had to stop it because it was going out of control. And that's the reality, power goes to people's heads. I mean, it can change a person. I remember, I think it was like 2 months ago, there was a thing on TV, and it happens in the prison force and it happens in the police force as well. If you get someone, give them a little bit of power, it starts going to their head and it starts changing them as a person. And I saw a case last week or last month, and it was in America, and it was a woman, a black woman, and I think she was having some sort of mental problems, some sort of delusions, and she phoned the police because she thought there was somebody in the back garden. She says, "Oh, I've got a prowler, can you send the police?" And I think her mum even phoned the police and said, "Look, she's having a mental problem, don't send any aggressive officers because she might be a little bit confrontational." So they've sent 2 coppers there, and one of them has gone in, and she was talking to the copper. It's all on video. It's been recorded by them police cameras, what they have, body cams. And he was talking to her, and she had a pot of water boiling on the stove. So he said to her something like, "Oh, you're going to take that water off, or it's going to overboil." And she says, "Oh yeah." So she's gone up, and she said something, I can't remember exactly what she said. She said something like, "I rebuke you in the name of the Lord." And he pulled his gun out. He says, "You better not. I'll shoot you in your fucking face." And she says, "Oh, I'm sorry." And she put her hands up like that. And he's gone boom, boom, boom. Shot her like 3 times in her face. Killed her. Dead. And afterwards, he's jumped back. He says, "Oh, she had that water. She came at us with that water. Look, it's trickling towards us now." And that was it, dead. And that's what happens, when the power gets to the head and you say something to somebody who's been telling people what to do, and then when somebody says no to them, they kick off. They don't know how to handle it because they're that used to pushing people around and telling people what to do, that when somebody pushes back, it can lead to violence like this. And especially if you add guns into the mix, it makes it 100 times worse. But anyway, prison can really change a person. Now, pussies in prison is somebody who gives it a big on the streets, and then when they get in there, they like start crying and banging on the pipes, and they can't hack it. I remember one guy who was from around where I live. I'm not going to say his name. He's got loads of kids, you know. I get on with most of his kids. A couple of them are dickheads, but I get on with most of his kids. And he's dead now. And I remember I was round at his house one day, and he was talking. He was in court for something. I can't remember what. And he was talking to us, saying, "Oh yeah, I'm up in court next week. Yeah, it's no bother to me." And he's saying, "If I get locked up, last time I was there, I had it boxed off. You know, I'm not bothered about prison. I'll do it on the toilet." And I didn't know, but I was in court as well, and it was on the same day he was. And I went to the back of the court. He didn't know I was there, and obviously I didn't shout him because you're not allowed to talk in court. So I just sat at the back in the corner and kept quiet. And he was up, and I can't remember who he was up for, but the judge said to him like, "Oh yeah, it's 3 months in prison, or 2 or 3 months in prison." And I remember he was like, he looked all confused. He was like, and he says, "Did you just give me 3 months in prison?" And the judge says, "Yes, 3 months. Take him down." And the group 4 came forward, and his legs buckled. He went, "Oh." He says, I can't go to prison." And he jumped and grabbed hold of like a banister, and the group 4 were pulling him away. He's going, I can't go to prison." I'm thinking, okay, hell, you were rock hard the other week when you were talking to us. And then they took him away and locked him up. And I never told him that I was there, you know, so nobody knew about it except me. But you get people like that, you know, they're giving it a large, and they end up crying in prison. And look, there's nothing wrong with crying in prison. I know they say, like, if you've got a job, kids, responsibilities, you know, you've got a house, a mortgage, then prison is a tough time, you know, when you're thinking about your kids or your wife. It can make you emotional, and you can cry, and people say, "Oh yeah, everyone cries on your first night in prison." But I can honestly say I've never cried in prison, because I was a loser back then. I was a homeless heroin addict, so I didn't really have hope to cry about. But I have cried in the police cells a few times actually, because just pure frustration, you know. It's like, I remember it, the first time I cried, it was, we used to go out shoplifting because we were drug addicts. I'm not condoning it, but you know, it happened. And we ended up in Tick Hill. And what we used to do is borrow someone's car, and we'd go around all the shops. There'd be like 2 or 3 of us, we'd get like 10 items each. An item is like a tube of toothpaste or a pack of bacon or something like that. And each shop we'd get 10 items, and then we'd sell them all like £1 each. If we had like 100 items, we'd sell them for 90 quid. And that's what we used to do. And we went to a 24-hour garage in Tick Hill in Donny. And I remember when I went in, there was nobody about. And I went in and I was nicking tins of Shaw, if I remember right. And I got 10, and she, the woman behind the till saw me. And she shouts, "Dave, stop him." And so I've gone running out of the shop. And there was fucking loads of people. It was like, where did all these come from? They were just spawning all over. And I thought, I'm not going to be able to get away from all these. And when you're an addict, you've probably got like a 10-second burst of speed, and then you're just exhausted. So I shot past the first person, and then the second one just rugby tackled me and picked me up. They all picked me up, took me back to the garage, tie wrapped me on the floor, and I had to sit on the floor, tie wrapped, waiting for the police. Now just imagine how embarrassing and degrading that is. And you know, I probably deserved it, but you know, I was laid on the floor, scruffy as out, long hair, scruffy clothes, skinny as out, tie wrapped on the floor, and there's people coming in buying petrol, just looking down at me, and I was like, wow, how did I end up here? And they took me back to the police cells, and we got in the cells. I'd only just got out a couple of days before, and I remember I'd lost all hope at this point. And I remember I looked out the hole in the cell door, made sure there was no one about, and I just broke down on my knees, and I just couldn't hack it, you know. I just broke down crying, and you know, I let it all out, and then I'm like, okay, you've got yourself here, let's go. And that's the reality of addiction, you know. You get stuck in it and you can't see a way out. It's I can't even figure it out now. How did I get caught up in that life? Why didn't I just do my detox and get out of it? But I couldn't. I was trapped. I just couldn't get out of it. You know, I can't explain it. I was just stuck in that life. But anyway, yeah, I broke down, and then, you know, once I got it all out, I felt a little bit better. So there's no wrong with crying in prison. I always remember a kid who he lived in Conisbrough, and there was some broken down garages where we all used to go to do drugs, and he used to like loiter around that area, and if he saw anyone in there doing drugs, he used to jump out, and he had a crossbow, and sometimes he'd say, "Oh, it's police, I want all your drugs." And people would give him them because they didn't know who he was. He didn't know if he was police or not. And he used to tax people in those sheds, and we used to go to those sheds. But he never taxed us because we had like a mutual understanding, you know. I mean, a couple of the kids who I knocked around were nuts anyway. They probably would have murked him up if he'd have tried out. But, you know, he didn't tax us, and we left him alone. And, you know, if he came around, we'd share his drugs with him, and it was like a mutual thing. And I remember when I got caught shoplifting or whatever, and I was in the cells, and he was in the cells. And I remember I walked past his cell, and I recognised him straight away, and he was laid on the floor, crying like a little girl. "Let me out, please let me out." And he was crying because he was in there, you know, because he wanted to get out. And he was saying to the police officer, who he had the door open, he had an officer sat at his door watching him. And I'm thinking, he's supposed to be this big tough guy, he's supposed to be this hard man, this tax man, and he's on the floor crying in front of everyone. And he was trying to grass. He was saying, "Oh, I'll take you to their houses. I'll tell you who it is. I'll tell you who's dealing." And the copper was saying, "Look, you know, we don't do that sort of thing," which they don't over here. I mean, never, the amount of times I've been through the system, no one's ever come to me and said, "Look, tell us some names and we'll let you go." You know, it doesn't really happen. Not to my knowledge, anyway. And, yeah, and he was trying to snitch, and the copper's saying, "No, we don't do that here." And I was thinking, wow, this is supposed to be the tough guy, the hard man, the man with a crossbow. And he's on the floor crying. But anyway, that's the 10-minute mark. I don't want to bore everyone. That's the video for today. Pussies in prison. If you go into prison, just keep your head down, you know. It's crap, it's boring, it's violent. But, you know, if you keep your head down, you don't start trouble, you don't go looking for trouble, you don't borrow if you can't pay it back, you'll be alright. And if you need a good cry in your cell, make sure nobody's about. Get your head on your pillow and have a little sob. Anyway, that's the video. If you like the video, press the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. Bonjour.